Will it be the SLK, the 350Z, or maybe the Z4? Decisions. That's this week on Motoring 2003.
TSN's Motoring 2003 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oil, oils fine-tuned for different engines, and Midas, Total Car Care. We do that.
If you love cars, and don't we all, then our favorite time of the year has to be when all the new models arrive. And how many of us have dreamt over the years of being able to drive all those new cars? Well, you can. If you're an automotive journalist, no, make that a Canadian automotive journalist, because each year all the new vehicles, cars, trucks, minivans, sports cars, you name it, if they're new, they arrive here at the racetrack in Shannonville, Ontario, and they arrive with keys.
This event has been taking place in its current format for about 10 years, overall for 15 or 16 years. We also now have a Canadian Truck of the Year award. This event, as far as we know, is unique in the world. The Canadian Automobile Journalists Association has all of its road test members come to one place at one time to test all of the vehicles that are new to the Canadian marketplace. We start off with expert testing to get raw baseline data. Then we have group testing of journalists that go and provide us with another opinion, and then we have individual testing. We take all of it together along with factors for pricing, for equipment levels, put it all together, and KPMG, our accounting firm, tabulates the results, and from that we pick a winner in each of about 9 categories. Then there's a separate ballot for Canadian Car of the Year and Canadian Truck of the Year.
Plus you've got the bed in the back, which is actually very practical to put all kinds of stuff in it.
The thing is, the back-to-back element is so good here. We drive the cars over the same route, so the cars in each category are driven back-to-back. There'd be a team of 4 of us in 4 cars and revolve through them. And so you really get a different feeling. Often you're surprised that, you know, a car that you thought was going to be the car of the year suddenly doesn't seem to measure up.
Avants are available with both engines, the 1.8 in this car, 170 horsepower, turbocharged, and the 3-liter V6 220 horsepower engine.
In my presentation, I'm going to show you the Vibe's unique blend of bold styling, innovative interior, and safety features that have created a new standard for the segment of station wagon.
Well, obviously, it's always good to get third-party evaluation of your products, and we respect the journalists in terms of evaluating our products as well as the competition. And there's the ranking that you go through as well. But it's also an opportunity for us to showcase our products. So in many cases, we bring the vehicles here to really have an audience with the journalists. And in some cases, some of the products, maybe some of the journalists wouldn't necessarily choose us out. And here's an opportunity for us to bring the product to them, in addition to go through the evaluation process. So we place a high value on participating.
The car that I've enjoyed the most just this morning, because I've been doing sports and performance cars, is the NSX, which almost didn't make the cut as qualifying as a new car. It just had enough new features to qualify, and although that's an old design, but it's a nice standard for everything else.
I spent all day Wednesday doing dynamic testing as part of our sort of setup for the whole event, and I drove some fabulous cars, the new 350Z and some really fabulous high-powered cars. But you know my favorites here? I took the Cooper S out and on the track again and flogged it around for half a dozen laps. It's an awesome little car. And Mazda have a hot rod version of their Protege here, which was equally fun. I like small, fast, nimble cars, and those two were probably my favorites so far.
This particular evaluation really stands out as a potential role model for other evaluations, and I personally am picking up some things, and I'm going to take some ideas back to other parts of the world where General Motors participates, and I think maybe we ought to have more evaluations like this, not just here in Canada.
Cars are getting better. Are the decisions getting tougher?
Very much so. It's very difficult. We have cars that win and lose in categories by 3 and 4 points out of 1,000 because cars are getting closer and closer to each other each year.
Is this hard work?
No, it is not hard work. You might be exhausted at the end of the day, but that's, there's a lot of enjoyable things we do that leave us exhausted, right?
As long as you got a smile on your face, that's the main thing.
I do.
What's that beautiful flag got to do with a Car of the Year program? I'll stick it to the Americans later on Kenzie's Corner.
Where most expect to find a $104,000 vehicle cruising a financial district or dropping the well-heeled off outside a theatre, we on Motoring like to do things a little differently. So this week we're going to go boonie bashing as we take a look at Land Rover's newest Range Rover. This is only the third all-new version of the Range Rover in 31 years, which is an extended life cycle to say the least. As with its forefathers, it remains one of the world's most accomplished off-road vehicles. The irony is, of course, it's also one of the least likely ever to be used as a boonie basher. The credentials the Range Rover brings to its on- and off-road repertoire is lengthy and packed with leading-edge technology. First up is an all-new unibody with an integrated chassis. The newfound strength means high levels of torsional rigidity, which in turn means fewer moans and groans, whether on or off-road. The fully independent suspension and its interconnected air springs also benefits from the stiff structure, as it allows it to work as intended. Off-road, this means soaking up large bumps. On-road, it brings a flat attitude with very little body roll, and this in spite of the vehicle's tall stance and relatively high centre of gravity. Once you get to your off-road location, select neutral, select 4 low, you're now ready to go off-roading. And when you find that really steep hill, another flick of a button, and you've now engaged hill descent control. The hill descent control feature works like a charm. Once active, the driver lifts off the gas and brake pedals on the way down a steep grade, letting the anti-lock brakes control the ride. It really is that simple. The Range Rover also features some other fancy electronic aids, including 4-wheel electronic traction control. Now this system works hand in hand with the full-time all-wheel drive system to keep the Rover going even in the really gooey stuff. There's also an all-terrain dynamic stability control system which tames over or understeer, and a decent anti-lock brake system that includes both brake assist and electronic brake force distribution. Suffice to say, it all works wonderfully well, hauling this heavy 5,400-pound vehicle to rest in 121 feet from 80k. With cars being as good as they are today, I don't very often get a good pet peeve, but with this Range Rover I most certainly do, and my friend the balloon here is going to show you all about it. If I stick it up in the sunroof and close it, as soon as enough pressure builds up, the sunroof bounces back. That's because it's got pinch protection. And if I climb out here and do the same with this window, now that could have been someone's fingers. Thanks to BMW's brief ownership of the Land Rover brand, the Range Rover comes with a state-of-the-art 4.4-litre engine, a motor manufactured by, you guessed it, BMW. This free-revving 32-valve V8 produces 282 horsepower and 325 pounds-feet of torque at 3,600 RPM. It's the type of work ethic that brings a surprisingly athletic feel. Tromping the gas pedal actually brings a sense of urgency, and the run from rest to 100k clocks in under 10 seconds.
You know, at one time, Range Rovers were famous for their nightmarish ergonomics. This latest generation, well, it stands in complete contrast because everything, well, it's as functional as it is pretty, and this is one of the best ones on the dashboard, at least to the eye. You get everything you want, so it's fully loaded. All of the controls are self-explanatory. There's plenty on the steering wheel, so you can adjust the radio and set the cruise control. There are, however, a couple of interesting things. Too good, too bad. The two good things: this switch allows you to lift the vehicle up, which is great when you're off-road, or to drop it down, which eases access to the interior of the vehicle. It works very well. Then you get to the shifter. Pulling it back into drive, you've got a fully automatic transmission. Moving it over to the left gives you a sport mode, and then you can nudge it up or down, which again is great whether you're on-road or off-road. Then you get to the two nav things. This thing here is supposed to be a coffee cup holder. Doesn't work very well. And then up here, the trip computer and the navigation system. The nav system is great. The trip computer, well, it tells you a rather depressing story. We've just been consuming 19 litres per 100 kilometres, or a very thirsty ride indeed. From a safety perspective, the Range Rover gets the lot. Aside from all the electronic gadgets, it employs a total of 8 airbags. There are front and side airbags, as well as side head protection airbags for both the front and rear seat riders. The final part of the SUV equation is utility. This Range Rover in that department is very good. Fold the seats down, you've got a ton of space. Lift them up, what's left is still more than generous. The only drawback, as the tailgate folds flat, it makes anything that goes up against the back seat somewhat difficult to reach. So now what do we think of this vehicle overall? Off-road, it's outstanding, and on-road, well, its performance surprised me. I'm just going to say I think it's a Grand Rover.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns flooded or wet-fouled engines. If you don't let your car fully warm up during sub-zero temperatures, it's entirely possible that you can get a flooded condition when you try to restart the car. That's when the spark plugs are actually fouled with raw fuel. They're wet with raw fuel. In that case, what you do, most cars will recognize what we call the clear flood mode. You crank the engine with the throttle wide open. Make sure that as soon as the engine jumps to life that you lift out of the throttle so the engine doesn't overspeed. You've got to pay attention and listen carefully so you don't damage that engine. The instant it starts, come out of the throttle. Now, if that doesn't work, there's one further trick that usually will get it going. You push the car up close enough to a building where you can plug in the block heater. Remember that most cars sold in the Canadian market have block heaters, and many people don't even know that they have them. Look for it, plug it in. If that doesn't work, push the vehicle inside a heated building until it warms up completely. That'll usually dry out that raw fuel in the engine and you'll get it restarted. That's your Midas tip of the week.
The Carrera 4S really features a lot of the styling and performance enhancements that you find on the 2002 911 Turbo without the turbocharged engine and perhaps without that extra high price tag. In the Canadian lineup, it replaces the 911 Carrera 4 Coupe. So now if you're interested in purchasing a Carrera 4 Coupe, the Carrera 4S is your model. It looks just like the Turbo from the front, the aggressive wide body and the enlarged air intakes. Looks very aggressive. It looks very much like a race car, if you will. So it resembles the Turbo from the front. The new engine is the classic flat six that you find in the 911, developing now 320 horsepower, up from 300 horsepower of the 2001 model. It incorporates also the VarioCam Plus variable valve timing system, which enhances the torque, enhances the performance in all 6 gears. 2002 version of the Targa is now a model based on the 911 Coupe with a large opening featuring a sliding glass roof. So now you have the stiffness of a 911 Coupe with the sensation of open-top driving that you'd find in a cabriolet. In Europe, and in Germany in particular, where the cars are built, our owners over there drive them 12 months of the year regardless of the weather conditions, and they really are designed to be driven that way and to be a daily driver. So we really encourage our owners to drive them in inclement weather. The engine is in the right place for traction, i.e. it's over the rear wheels, and it handles very, very well in snow conditions.
We're back here at the AJAC Test Fest. As I mentioned earlier, every brand new car and truck is here as automotive journalists from across the country attempt to select their car of the year. Now, we've got vehicles here as cheap as $13,000 or less when you're talking vehicles like the Kia Rio or the Hyundai Accent. But I know that's not what you want to see. What you want to see is what's behind me. Let's start off with the Acura NSX, the Mercedes SL55, the Nissan 350Z, the Infiniti G35 Coupe, the BMW Z4, and last but not least, the Hummer. Now we're talking 6 vehicles here. The grand total is over $400,000. Not bad. But you know, I think there might be something missing in this row, and the guy to tell us what that is our man in the Quaker State Garage, Bill Gardner.
Brad, you know what's missing from that lineup? A car I could actually afford. Holy cow, talk about sticker shock. But you know, when you're a mechanic, you don't look at the price of new cars because you're never going to buy one anyways. You buy old cars and you fix them forever. And you know, if you keep a car long enough, sooner or later, you're going to replace lots of components. So I'm going to talk about one key component on a modern car today. That's the crankshaft sensor. Now, if you remember in the older cars, you had a distributor. Look at a modern car today, you'd be hard-pressed to find a car that has a distributor. And this is one of the key components involved in distributorless ignition systems that have replaced the distributor. And this is the crankshaft sensor. Now, this crankshaft sensor sticks into a hole in the engine block, and when it's in the engine block, there's all that you see of it, just the head of it sticking out and a wiring plug that comes along and plugs into it, one little fastener that holds it secure in the engine. The rest of the sensor is inside the engine, and this sensor picks up on a series of notches on the crankshaft so that the computer running the spark and the fuel injection on your engine can figure out where cylinder number 1 is and if the engine is in fact cranking over and the speed that it's turning over at. So this crankshaft sensor is a very important input on a modern car. Now this one we were just replaced the other day, and it was from a car that got towed in. When the car was hot, it would quit, there would be no spark, and when it would cool down, it would start again, there would be spark, it would start up again, and you could drive for 5 or 10 minutes. And this is a typical symptom of a car with a bad crankshaft sensor. Now, another symptom that you could have is a vehicle that just worked fine one night, you drove home without any problem, you come out the next morning, the car's cooled down, turn the key, no start, no spark, and you have to get it towed in to get it fixed. Now, it's not uncommon to replace a crank sensor in a GM V6 engine, but you know, it usually has to be quite a few model years old and have a lot of miles on it before it fails the first time. But that isn't always the case with a crank sensor failure. For example, late model Grand Cherokees and Ram pickups, the crank sensors can fail at a fairly early age. And in many cases, there are no symptoms leading up to it. You're driving along, everything's fine, and all of a sudden it just cuts out and you're dead in the water. You have a no start, no spark situation. The engine cranks over, but it won't start. Now, the crank sensor is usually not easy to locate, and it's not easy to diagnose either. So it usually involves a tow in, and you're going to have a professional mechanic, first of all, check it out and then replace it. It's on the GM V6s, this sensor, for example, is only a $40 part. It's rather inexpensive once you've checked it out. Other engines can be $100 and more, but it's certainly not something that a do-it-yourselfer can do. You're going to have to get into a professional mechanic. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2003.
You viewers probably think that people like me have the best job in the world. Well, it's pretty hard to argue when you look at this array of cars that have been brought here to Shannonville Motorsport Park just so people like me and Graham and a couple of other people from motoring can drive them. The purpose of this? Well, it's the Automobile Journalists Association Cars and Trucks of the Year. We've been running this program for just about as long as motoring's been on the air. What makes our program different from some of those other Cars of the Year program? is that we actually test the cars. And that doesn't seem like such a radical concept, perhaps, but most of these programs that you hear about, European Car of the Year, Japanese Car of the Year, these things are done by ballot. They send the ballots to the jurors, they check off their favorite cars, and they send the ballots in. Who knows where they've even driven a car? There's no checks. In this program, we bring the cars to this location. Every journalist gets into every car or truck, drives them on the track, drives them on the road, gets in and out of the back seat. We find out what the best cars are because we drive them back to back on the same surface on the same day. Now, there are some magazines that have Cars of the Year. You've seen thousands of ads for those. But if only one magazine's involved, who's to say that maybe it's ad pages that are being evaluated, not the caliber of the car? I'm not saying it happens, but for the Canadian Car of the Year, we've got writers from Halifax, we've got TV guys from Vancouver, we got radio guys from Ottawa, we got people from coast to coast in every media possible, and the ballots are all secret. We don't even know who wins until the award winners are announced at the Montreal Auto Show for each category, and later on at the Canadian International Auto Show in Toronto next February. Canadian Car of the Year, Canadian Truck of the Year, believe me, when you see these awards announced, you know these things have been chosen by the best process anywhere in the world. Proud to be a Canadian? You're darn right. I'm Jim Kent.
Well, they're wrapping things up here at the AJAC Test Fest in Shannonville, Ontario, as they continue to look at vehicles and pick their overall cars of the year. But as you know, the real car of the year, the one that counts, happens right here on Motoring, and that special is quickly approaching. We want to get you involved, so go to the Motoring webpage at motoringtv.com or click in tsn.ca. You will see our nominees for each segment, and we want you to make your selection. Whoever comes closest to agreeing with our selections will win a grand prize. And what is it? Well, it's a day next year at this Test Fest, which means you will have the keys to every car 2004 model at your disposal. Stay tuned for more details as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
I'm just amazed by the number of cars and all the modifications people have done to their cars and the enthusiasm, unbridled enthusiasm. It's incredible.
TSN's Motoring 2003 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oil, oils fine-tuned for different engines, and Midas, Total Car Care. We do that.